The universe possesses an accounting system. It is a ledger written in energy, not ink, and governed by a Newton-esque law of spiritual returns. For every ounce of suffering dispensed into the world, a shadow is cast, lengthening until it eventually eclipses the source. In the jagged, restless Nigerian city of Aba, with its persistent clatter of industry, this law never sleeps. It exists in the humid corners of warehouses and the chaos of the bustling markets, gathering interest on debts that no amount of stolen wealth could ever settle. The year was 2002. Christian and his younger brother Ebenezer were architects of a quiet chemical slaughter. In a country where hospitals were crumbling monuments to broken promises, the people turned to the local chemist for salvation. Christian and Ebenezer took advantage of it in the form of chalk, industrial starch, and vivid yellow food coloring pressed into tablets and stamped with the stolen logos of life-saving brands. To them, it was merely commerce. They do not see the parents sitting by lantern light, watching a child's fever climb toward a point of no return while they administered the brother's counterfeit medicine thinking it was the real thing. They saw only the neat rows of naira notes and their expanding inventory. Like parasites, they had latched onto an industry meant to provide relief for the suffering, and in their hunger and greed, they had mutated. They were no longer mere men of commerce, they had become merchants of malady. They took the sacred trust between the healer and the broken and hollowed it out, filling the void with white dust and deception. To Christian and Ebenezer, a cough was a coin and a fever was a fortune. In their little warehouse, the line between healing and harm was erased by the labor of a manual press. Their business involved mixing industrial starch and bitter chalk with dyes to mimic the hues of life-saving antibiotics and repackaging crates of expired medicine scavenged from dumps in Lagos. They distributed the very essence of the grave, packaged in bright foil and sold with a smile. A month ago, everything began to fall apart. Ebenezer, the younger and more meticulous of the two, had started to fray. He spoke of a recurring dream about an old woman weeping his name. One morning, on a routine trip to Lagos, Ebenezer simply vanished. No bus accident, no ransom demand, just a void where a man used to be. Christian had just returned to his home from the police station, his heart heavy and leaden. He would never let himself believe his brother was no more, but he could already feel grief at the door. The sun was setting, casting long shadows into the house he and his brother had built on the foundations of their counterfeit business. The house was too quiet. Then he heard it, a sound of weeping drifting from Ebenezer's room. Christian's blood turned to ice. He pushed the door open. The room was a mess. Clothing was strewn across the floor and the wardrobe had been emptied as if a strong wind had blown through it. At the center of the mess lay the inventory ledger. Christian picked it up. He expected the neat blue ink of his brother's handwriting. Instead, the pages were drenched in a deep, viscous crimson. Every line, every column, every date had been overwritten in a jagged, frantic script, a single word repeated until the paper was saturated: death. He slammed the book shut, his breath coming in ragged gasps, and fled to his own bedroom. There she was waiting for him. The old woman his brother had told him about was sitting on the edge of his bed. She did not move, but her presence felt like the onset of a storm. Her skin was pale, and she wore a dull wrapper the color of hummus. She looked at him with ancient eyes that spelled collective grief. "I am the mother of every child whose breath stopped because of your greed," she whispered, her voice a grating chorus of 1,000 mourning cries. "I am the sister of every man who looked for a cure and found only the grave you dug for him." Christian tried to speak, to offer a plea, money perhaps, but his throat seized. "You have sold people a counterfeit of life," the hag continued, her voice gaining a terrifying resonance. "Now you shall get a counterfeit of health. You shall know the intimacy of every agony you have packaged and sold." Christian felt his tongue go numb first. He reached up to touch it, but it felt like a dry, porous slab of chalk in his mouth, absorbing every drop of moisture until his throat cracked. Then he felt his searing heat in his chest, the chemical burn of the very dyes he had used to color his fake anti-malarials. It felt as if his blood had been replaced with acid, staining his skin with blotches of deep purple and sickly yellowish jaundice. He began to panic, but his limbs refused the command to run. His lungs, once clear, suddenly felt filled with suffocating powder. Every breath was a struggle through a cloud of industrial starch. He clutched at his stomach as it knotted into a permanent, agonizing cramp, the signature of the toxic thickeners he had bottled as cough syrup. The old woman stood up, her shadow stretching across the ceiling. "You will not die, Christian," she told him. "Death is a mercy for those with a conscience, and you have no conscience. You will remain here, a living shrine to your wickedness. You will be the patient who can never be cured." She vanished into the deepening shadows of the room, leaving only the scent of formaldehyde and chalk. Christian slumped against the wall, his body a battlefield of 1,000 illnesses. He felt the malaria chills he had denied to treatment in others, the respiratory failure he had caused, and the slow grinding rot of organs starved of real medicine. He was a prisoner in a body sickened with a curse and poison, his eyes wide and unblinking, staring at the door of a room he would never leave.